Hello everybody and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering Arena video. First things first, yes, you now have to look at my face whilst listening to me talk about things. I've managed to finally get myself a webcam that actually works, so I'll be using it going forwards. Second thing is, throughout this video I managed to play a whole bunch of games, and it turns out that OBS had somehow stopped. My mic had stopped working on OBS. It was working through Windows, just not through OBS. So there's a load of picture of me just waving my lips around and you can't actually hear me. I think instead of me trying to re-record the whole thing, I might just go back and put some sort of commentary over the games, because they're pretty good games for the most part. So sorry if I'm sort of like not lip syncing to myself, but talking over myself, with my lips moving at a different speed. Normally wouldn't have been an issue. Happens to be the first time I put myself on video, but there we go. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Today I am going back to Streets of New Capenna crime bosses, and I am picking up with Lord Xander the Collector. So Lord Xander is a 7-costing vampire demon noble. When he enters the battlefield, target opponent discards half the cards in their hand rounded down. When he attacks, they mill half their library rounded down, and when he dies, they sacrifice half the non-land permanents they control rounded down. If all of that was rounded up, this card would be fantastic. Since it is rounded down, I would say this card is average at best, verging on bad. But since I have made a rule where I have to play 4 of them, I'm playing 4 of them. The other Streets of New Capenna rare I'm ticking off today is a significantly better card. It's the Aven Heartstabber. It's a 2-costing, a blue and a black 1/1 flyer. As long as there are 5 or more mana values among cards in your graveyard, it has 2/2 and Death Touch, so it's a 3/3 Death Touch. When it dies, mill 2 and draw a card. So it has a pretty high floor in terms of we can always draw pretty much. I mean, there are a few things that could exile this, but things like Vanishing Verse don't hit it. People aren't going to waste loads of removal on this card. So yeah, pretty good for filling up our graveyard, and also sometimes we kill it ourselves with things like Meat Hook. I've even killed it myself with Rare Enfeeblement. So decent card. Other new cards from Streets of New Capenna, where sort of our main engine of the deck is Graveyard Shift, which is a 5-costing sorcery. It has flash as long as there are 5 or more mana values among cards in our graveyard, which is just reanimate a creature from our graveyard basically. So this is the main way we're going to be summoning Lord Xander rather than hard casting. We will be bringing it back from the graveyard. We have Graveyard Shift to do that. We have Olivia Crimson Bride, which can resurrect Lord Xander for good, as he is also a legendary vampire. And we have 1 copy of Carder's Vicious Return, which is a 4-costing saga. First level is when we can sacrifice a creature to deal 3 damage. This is quite a nice way to sacrifice Aven Heartstabber to draw the card and mill. Each player discards, where we can discard our Xander, and then we can bring him back with a 1/1 counter on and haste. Other new cards, Evelyn the Covetous is not a card that I've actually managed to use much in the deck, but it's in here just because it's on colour, and also it's a 5 mana costing creature, of which we need to sort of smooth out our curve. Since we have these effects of 5 or more mana values in the graveyard, I need to have a smooth-ish curve, as in roughly the same number at each level. So I can hit that 5 or more mana values more easily, and she happens to be a 5-costing creature. When Evelyn the Covetous or another vampire enters the battlefield under your control, exile the top card of each player's library with a collection counter on it. Once a turn, you may play a card from exile with a collection counter on it if it was exiled by an ability you controlled, and you may spend mana as though it were any mana of any colour to cast it. So basically, when this or this or this enters the battlefield, we exile the top card of each library and we can play them at some point. So it kind of has a slight tie-in with our vampire theme and is a 5-costing rare from Streets of New Capenna, and that's why we're playing it. We're running 3 big scores just because it's a great way of putting our Xander in the graveyard, getting some treasure to ramp to being able to hardcast things, and drawing. 4 Kaitos, he's really the heavy lifter of the deck. Everyone knows what that does, but it gives us that ability to draw and discard. And also, if we ever get to -7, we can put in the Xander using that ability. 4 Fable of the Mirror Breaker, possibly the worst that it can be in, because all of our creatures pretty much are legendary. However, it's still good. Obviously, if we do manage to create a token of anything, it will be of this, because it will let us draw a card and mill. But it's mostly there for the ability to discard and draw and to ramp. 4 meat hooks to help us get to this late game stage where we can do all of this shenanigans, 2 Ray of Enfeeblement because white is everywhere, mostly Rafine and Esper decks, but also mono white still exists, and then 3 Duresses to deal with all the other nonsense, things like whenever we run into blue white or bombardment decks, this gives us a chance. That is the deck. All of my games today have been recorded as best of 3. The reason for that is that Lord Xander the Collector is not very good. So you wouldn't, if you're trying to make a competitive deck, really put 4 of this in. What you would probably do is have a blend of Lord Xander, Jin, Taxis and Toxrill, as all of these can be fetched by Kaito. All of them can be resurrected from the graveyard with decent effects. Jin Taxis is good against certain spell-related decks, and Toxrill is good against certain creature-related decks. So what I would probably normally do is have a blend of these in here, but as that's not my challenge, they're in the sideboard instead to help me deal or adjust to the right kind of deck. What I'm then running is the rest of the Ray of Enfeeblements and Duresses to be able to tweak my 1-drops to deal with creatures or spells a little bit better. We're running Go Blanks to deal with mirrors and bombardment decks, and then I'm running a whole bunch of counters in here for when we're playing particularly spell heavy decks, or if people board in Go Blank against us, we need a way of negating that because it pretty much, you know, makes our whole deck fall apart. So that is the deck. I will now run it into some games and show you how I got on. Alright, so as I said, I'm recording the sound after the fact, as my mic wasn't working through every game and I didn't even notice until the end. So this is game 1. Obviously that is, I would say, probably not a keep, but I did keep it, I think, because Duress and Ray means I can deal with something early on. I've got a reanimation spell and I've got one of my reanimation targets. I think the idea here is I'll probably take the Invoke the spare because the rest of this, I don't care about the land destruction and don't really care about countering creatures, as I'm not going to be hard casting that many. Another Duress because I know what's in their hand now, and there happens to be a negate. Get rid of that, wonderful. Don't want to be negated. Opponent land destroying, obviously I've got plenty of basics in this deck. I don't actually own any Xander's Lounge, the Triome, so because I'm not running any of those, I've got plenty of basics, and I luckily top deck my final colour that I require that gives me a crack using Kaito. Managed to put Xander in the graveyard, and obviously I've got 2 graveyard shifts to bring it back, so for me it's just now trying to get the lands to do so. Ditching the Ray because the opponent clearly has no white creatures. I think I was just looking at the different mana values I had available then for graveyard shift to see if I can get it to be an instant. Opponent's obviously playing like a bombardment deck, having put Magma Opus and Cleansing Wildfire in the deck. So no need for Meat Hook, and then I can graveyard shift in my Xander. Since I can see 60% of their hand, I can be fairly sure there's no negate, and it's worth trying, even if I'm worried about that. Opponent's obviously just thinking at this point. I'm probably saying something very offensive. So opponent's forced to discard 2. They discard Meat Hook and Wildfire, realising they're no good against me. And they apparently don't want to deal with Xander the Collector. I would say that generally Xander is not a concede-worthy card, but you know, some people are just scared of it. Obviously I'm taking out all the creature-related cards, and then the opponent concedes, and that is best of 3 game 1. Too easy. Okay, game number 2. Miso Zero. I actually can't remember which of these I won and lost, so I'm kind of spectating at the same time. Obviously did not win the flip this time. That's not a bad hand. Got a Heart Stabber for turn 2. I've got a reanimation spell. I'm missing a decent target, but got enough mana to actually hard cast Evelyn if we need to. See, that Requisitioner is a nice target for me to block with Heart Stabber. If I was the opponent, and I probably have Ob Nixilis in hand, I would not attack, because you want to be able to clone your Ob Nixilis, and that is an obvious block for me. Managed to pick up a Duress as well to try and find the Planeswalker. Okay, they get down the Chariot instead. That is quite painful. Obviously not something that's easy to deal with for my deck. I mean, I have meat hooks to sweep up the tokens, but I don't have one in hand, and they did have the Obnixilis in their hand, so yeah, that's what I thought I was avoiding, and I managed to run into something a bit worse, but it's what it is. I think basically the priority for me is to try and get a Xander into the graveyard. So I need to A, draw one, and B, find a way of ditching it. And it's already starting to look quite painful with these creatures on the board. Basically, if I don't draw a meat now, which I don't, I think this is probably game 1 over. 6, it's 12 damage on the board. I can't even put a creature in. I'm just working that out. Yeah, there we go. So game 2, obviously, what I've probably worked out is that I am playing against a Jund deck, so no need for Ray of Enfeeblement. Creatures on the opponent's team, so Toxrill is good, Evelyn less good. Took one of the Xanders out. I still tried to keep at least 1 or 2 in every deck, otherwise it's not really a Xander deck, but I have to tweak it, otherwise we'll fail too horribly at best of 3. The Duresses are still good because they're running Obnixilis and Chariot, so I think I kept 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 maybe, but yeah, got rid of the Rays. I think I still have my bad sideboard at this point as well. Not bad, but not the worst version, but definitely not the best version. I think I still had some dud cards in there. I'll cut. The opponent finally got their act together. So we look at both the way of discarding, Toxrill, a Duress. Yeah, this looks like a pretty decent hand. There's no reanimation spell, but everything else is there. So obviously want to get the Duress down early, try and find the Obnixilis or the Chariot. We find the Chariot, so that's a nice removal, otherwise we really struggle to remove that. So there is another thing for us to discard to Fable. So as Fable can discard 2, it's kind of perfect. The thing that I'm not sure of here is whether the opponents realised that I'm a reanimated deck, because I didn't really do any reanimation or anything really last turn. I did play the Heartstabber, but obviously I didn't try and reanimate anything. But it'd be a test to see how sort of keen-eyed the opponent is, as to whether we see any graveyard hate coming out. So ditch both my creatures into the graveyard, and then draw some pretty nice cards. Still no reanimation spell though. I'm just considering which of the 3 drops to play, if any, or whether I want to just hold open negate, because the opponent now has 4 unknown cards in hand. Obviously I do not want to see a Chariot, it's too painful for me. Opponent just passes back. Obviously that could mean that they're being cautious. So I decided to play the Vicious Return, I think with the idea of sacking the Reflection, because the Reflection's not very good in this deck. And if I can kill off the underdog, it means they can't clone Obnixilis next turn if they have it, or if they draw it. So that happens. And then I realised that the opponent is running Go Blank, which is pretty much the worst card for me to be hit by. So having only kept open 1 mana, I'm probably very annoyed at this point. I think I decided to keep Kaito just because it's got the best chance of me actually drawing into other cards that I might want. obviously I'm putting Olivia in the bin because it comes back with the Vicious Return next turn, in theory. I was hoping to find another creature there in case they managed to get rid of the Olivia, or to bring back with the Olivia. Obviously the opponent has a Hive, which can exile Olivia from the graveyard, so that's 2 sets of graveyard hate for me, which I think, I don't know, I think Big Score probably keeps me in the game a bit longer, but yeah, that's obviously a pretty bad situation to be in.
It's like your defenses aren't even there.
Obviously I can't play Big Score because you need to be able to discard something to play it, so what I should have done is plus Kaito really, because all I've done is let them kill it for free with the Hive along with exiling something. So I cast Big Score, ditch Interest, pick up a negate only. You can see from my face it doesn't look good. Not having either anything in the graveyard to reanimate or any reanimation spells isn't brilliant. I mean, I've got the mana to hardcast the creature, but I'm already down to 8, and the opponent's got 4 cards in hand and an underdog to hit me with. Obviously I can play out the Fable, but it doesn't really give me what I need. I think it's probably for the best that we can't hear what I'm saying at this point. Probably not that clean. I think I negate that out of frustration, to be honest, as I don't actually care about keeping that token alive. I just thought I'd keep it there as a blocker, but I would be better off holding out for whatever they might play now. So pretty much have to block because down to 8, so I can't really lose 3. And if the opponent has an Obnix list, then I don't want them to be able to copy it, which they do. So even though they can't copy it, I'm still pretty much dead. Down to 6 and top decking lands. Heartstabber would obviously be a 3/3 flyer, but it's game over. Alright, next game. 1 land is a mulligan. That is a lot better. Got a resurrection spell, resurrection target, some interaction. Sadly I've got to put one of them on the bottom. Probably bottoming the duress just because it's a more situational card, but I can't actually remember what I did. Yep. So duress on the bottom. Obviously it doesn't give me, so I don't have anything to do for 3 turns, but could be good. Looks like a mono green given the snow lands. So drawing so that I can discard the Xander. Mammoth is obviously slightly worrying. And I didn't manage to get a land even with 2 cards. But at least mono green, there's probably not too much graveyard hate or anything like that. Yeah, there's a brawl. That's pretty nasty. Means Kaito's dead for free. So I was digging for a land and did just about get one. Obviously not loads of great options though, with just 4 mana against that board from the opponent. I don't know what I'm saying, probably shit. This is a bad state of affairs. Something along those lines. It is weird watching yourself talking, trying to work out what I might have said. Something like, this is looking bad, don't have any way to deal with the troll, trample against this deck is nasty. Trample is definitely a weakness of the deck. Just working out what values I have in the graveyard. Whenever I look at the graveyard like that, I'm working out what values I've got. So this is where I work out that I have got, got the flash ability to ring in Xander. So therefore I can use it to block. And the fact that the opponent hasn't created the tree folk immediately is good for me, because we wouldn't be able to deal with that pressure. Flashing in Xander, the blocker. Opponent has to discard one of their 2. Block the Mammoth and block the Sculptor. That's 2 good blocks, really. Problem is now the Tree Folk is a bit out of range of my deck to deal with. And then there's a whole another one of them. So I think at this point I'm thinking I need to attack to try and bait a block, because if they plus Ren and get a land, that puts their Tree Folk at 7 and out of the range of Xander to kill. And if they block, at least they have to sack half their permanents, which will just be 1 permanent, but because there'll only be 3 left. And it's rounded down. Imagine if that was rounded up, what a difference it would make. So I guess they'll sack the troll. I mean, they shouldn't have blocked at all, because they had the win then. If they'd have just let the Ren die. But I mean, all they need to do is put 1 land in, and the chance of them missing a land in the top 4 is low. So yeah, they did get 1, so that is the win. Except obviously I can flash in Xander, which they don't know about. But I do then have to just jump with it. Again, if that was discard rounded up, they'd have had to discard their 1, which would make a massive difference in this game. They then have to sack half their permanents, but because they've still got the old growth troll, I guess they can sack that. So it's a relatively easy life. And then obviously Chariot and Ren combo is pretty much a killer. Nothing I can really do, I think. It's probably conceding now. Nope. I think I might try meat hooking first, even though it's pretty obviously a loss, because I don't have enough mana to then even get a blocker in play afterwards. Those get wiped, but yeah. Opponent just creates another Tree Folk, can power up their Chariot with that one, and then they hit for 11. Game over. So Sadly did not win the first one, but obviously there's no... I think what I realise at this point is I don't have great tech against mono green in my sideboard because they don't really fit into the spells category and they don't really fit into well, creatures, but like they're not small enough to be too worried about Toxrill too quickly, so I think this is where I'm saying instead of having 2 spell pierces I probably want like 2 fading hopes or something, because I'm probably never going to want 5 counter magic. What I'm more likely to want is some bounce for when it's a token heavy deck like this. So that's a pretty nice hand, isn't it? I mean, Heartstabber into Kaito on the play is very solid. Should move my fat head out of the way of Evelyn, but I just thought maybe I put myself on, don't know, there's nowhere good to put the webcam picture really to let you watch what the cards say when I right click on them, which I do quite often. Managed to draw a land, which is nice, can big score. So the turn 3 chariot is never nice to face. As you can see, my face winces. So I think I'm thinking whether to plus before or after, like if I want to attack or not, basically, or whether I just want to create a blocker. To clearly decide to just plus because I want the Aven Heartstabber as a blocker. So I ditched one of the big scores as we don't have 2 things to discard from our hand, barely have 1. And then obviously opt to big score in their turn. Sadly the opponent's got a turn 3 chariot and a turn 4 Ren, which is pretty disastrous for us. So opponent swings with everything at Kaito. At this point I might as well big score. Discarding Evelyn. But I did manage to pick up a meat hook and obviously got quite a bit of mana following the big score, so this is starting to give me a glimmer of hope, I think. And then pick up a Toxrill as well. Obviously decide to meet her because Toxrill is not going to be quick enough to get rid of their creatures here. So kill them all off in one go. Plus Kaito, it's a draw. Discard the Toxrill as a reanimation target. Opponent can power up the chariot and then kill off Kaito, which I'm not too worried about because I do have one in hand and it was low loyalty anyway. But now I've got all 5 values in my graveyard. I don't think I can afford to do anything and graveyard shift, or if I do it's instant, so I think this is a very slow calculation happening in my head as to whether I can big score and graveyard shift. Obviously big score is a net of 2 down, so it's not that difficult to work out, but so at this point what I'm thinking is, should I graveyard shift in the Toxrill as a blocker? Because if I block and they have a Blizzard Brawl, they get a free kill on the Toxrill, which obviously I don't want to give them. So I think that's what's going through my head at the moment. I was trying to see if I could see how many Blizzard Brawls had gone, and the answer was not very many, so I'm assuming that they had one. So I opt not to cast anything at this point. Obviously, can cast Big Score, as there's no counter magic in mono green at the moment. And I pick up a Duress, which I'm happy about, because I can use the Duress to see if they have a Blizzard Brawl before using the Toxrill as a blocker if I'm going to do so in future. So the opponent taps out, so it's easy for me to then flash in Toxrill at the end of their turn. And then I can check their hand for Blizzard Brawls and be relatively safe that Toxrill can whittle them down. I think this is the way my brain's going. So on the other hand, what I've realised is that I can just play Lord Xander, so that is an option too. But I think in the end I decide to Duress because protecting Toxrill is going to win me the game. So it turns out they've got no Blizzard Brawls, but they have boarded in a Froghemoth. So if they do get through with an attack, they'll be able to empty everything good out of my graveyard. So obviously I opt not to attack here, or I hope I do, because it's just going to get jumped by the 1/1, which is going to die this turn anyway. So better off having Toxrill as a defender. Okay, so all 3 of those wolves die, 3 triggers of meat hook, 3 slugs produced. Looking pretty good for me at this point. Sculptor of Winter. No big threat there. I mean, Sculptor would die in 2 turns to Toxrill anyway. I'd say this is where I'm very unhappy, because the opponent has just top decked the Blizzard Brawl. My face says it all. Like, I've just managed to play as well as I can, get the Duress down, try and protect my Toxrill, and then they managed to rip one off the top. So yeah, obviously that is a huge swing in this game. Toxrill being dead makes my board state a lot less happy, and buffs back up their creatures that had the slug tokens on. I decided to block with all of those creatures in order to kill off the chariots. Can't have it producing tree folk every single turn. And I get left with just 1 ninja. Obviously I have a Xander in hand, so that is something. But the opponent having 7/7s tends to not mean Xander is that valuable. So what I then top deck is a Graveyard Shift, which means I can get my Toxrill back. So I decide to do it in my turn because I want to get the tick of Toxrill, put in the -1 counters on the opponent. Can kill off Ren with my token and draw a card.
There's no secret I can't uncover.
And then start the minusing. I think what I then count or calculate at this point is that I could be dead if the opponent attacks at everything, because I can't let the Froghemoth get through, because it's going to give them a bunch of life back and exile my graveyard. So if they were to attack with the Froghemoth and these tree folk, it would be 4 plus 12 plus 5 for the rest, which is 17. So I'd have to block something. But what I think is the opponent doesn't realise that, because once they've put those 2 more, it's actually 19, i.e. I have to block the biggest thing. So they could have killed the Toxrill if they attack face with everything. Since they send some things at Kaito, I have the option to just block the Froghemoth, which obviously makes my life a lot easier. I nearly sacrificed Toxrill to itself accidentally using the wonderful Arena UI, but do eventually decide to just block with it instead, and I go to 3. But given the Froghemoth is dead, and then there's going to be 3 more slug tokens coming my way, it's looking a bit better. At this point I was worried because they picked up a Liberator, and I thought they would kill off the Meat Hook, which would stop my life gain. However, they choose to kill the Fable, even though I've already had the useful bit out of it, so that was nice for me. And at this point I think the opponent basically times out to the point where they concede. So I'll cut this video short. It was a big shame because I really wanted to see how the game went. I mean, I was about to get a whole another 3 slugs, which obviously would be great for me, and I had a Xander in hand, but because they time out, it just gives me automatic 2 wins, and yeah, that's the end of this game. Okay, final game versus Trophy. Same rank, so should have a chance if I ever do. On the draw, it's an expensive hand on the draw. I can't actually remember if I get this or not. Okay, apparently I snap keep this, despite not really having much. I think because I have Meat Hook, I feel confident that I could deal with like some early game creature stuff, but on the draw that's probably not a valid assumption. I think I'm just talking about how bad Xander is, to be honest, at this point. What's probably going to happen after me making this video is someone more popular is going to come out saying how great it is and proving what a good card it is after I've struggled so hard with it, but hey, that's life. Obviously picking up Ray of Enfeeblement looks lovely in this situation, as I'm against Esper, you can tell at this point, because both of those are black lands as well. So definitely a nice pickup of Ray of Enfeeblement, well worth main decking for this exact matchup. Obviously Leisure Shredder is something that this deck struggles to deal with a bit, because Massacre can't take it out until turn 5, by which point it's normally grown anyway. So I think I'm planning on using Big Score. I want to try and draw more land, and obviously ramp myself. And since I can ditch Lord Xander, I can bring it back with Olivia next turn. It's a pretty nice combo. It's pretty much the deck playing out as it should. Put Xander in the bin, pick up another land, very much an ideal draw. Play a land, play Olivia, use Olivia to resurrect the Xander we just put in, giving the opponent no time to mess about with it. I think at this point I'm saying, if we're going to run 4 Xanders, we should probably run more Olivias, because that actually works really well. Opponent has to discard half their hand, which we've managed to get out pretty early, so that's only 2 cards, obviously rounded down. But then we've got the Graveyard Shift to follow up if they manage to destroy one of these 2 creatures. So just having a quick look at what the opponent's discarded. I mean, this is where I think Rafine decks are slightly tricky to play, because obviously you're only getting the connive the more creatures you attack with, but when the opponent's got a more dangerous board than you don't really want to be attacking all the time. So it's a bit of a catch-22 for this deck in this situation. So opponent opts to attack with both, which I'm finding probably a curious option, because allowing me to swing back with Xander and Olivia could be dangerous for them, since they're playing Kaito.
There are many
They're obviously fishing for their land that they're missing,
I'll be taking that now.
which they have there. Obviously I've got plenty of mana, so no reason not to just be attacking for me, I think. Nothing extra to bring back with Olivia, which is a shame. Mill half the opponent's library. Put them on 5. And then meat hook for 5, because my Olivia's not really doing much. Whereas I don't want their Shredder growing out of range where I can kill it at all. So this way I've got my Xander and all their creatures are dead. It also means I've got Olivia, which is my only 6 converted mana cost, 6 mana value, sorry, the new phrase, creature in the graveyard, so counts towards my 5 types that I need. So they just generate a 1/1 as a blocker. I go to attack with Xander, but gets killed by Hankra Mauling, which means they have to sacrifice half their permanents, which presumably they sacrifice their token. Now we can bring back Olivia, but I don't want to do that in my second main phase because I want to use her haste to attack. So I might as well put Kaito,
The system can't fix everything.
draw and discard. I put the 2 mana card in the graveyard to activate the other 2 mana card, and I hold on to a meat hook for, I mean the opponent's a creature based deck, so meat hook's always good. So opponent's just fishing. I'm itching to play the graveyard shift again. Obviously, attacking with Tenacious Underdog is just the opponent suiciding because they're down to 1 and we have a meat hook in play. So that's a concede from the opponent, game 1. So that is pretty much the perfect run out. I mean, getting Olivia down on turn 5, once you've already managed to put a Xander in the graveyard, is about as good as it gets with this deck. And when it does go that well, it works well. So what I'm obviously doing here is getting the raise, because this is a dangerous white deck that we're playing against. And then I think I'm now thinking about taking the Toxrills as it is a creature deck. I'm not sure any further updates are required yet, so stuck with it like that because I haven't seen loads of spells that we need to be countering from the opponent, and they don't often get played in the Rafine deck, and can't see Jingataxius being more useful or less useful than the Xander, and since it is a Xander deck I figure I might as well play it. Opponent's sideboards for quite a while here, so if it's too long I'll cut some out. No, not too bad. I'm probably just saying how long people get to sideboard and how ridiculous it is, or something along those lines. So, had to mulligan there, as it was just too bad from the draw. And now I've at least got something early game with the Ray and the Avon Heartstabber. So Heartstabber down. Obviously, when I don't have a land, I'm thinking of ways to kill my Heartstabber, preferably with a block. Opponent gets Rafine down on turn 3, which is very, very dangerous, so I opt to just Ray that, even though I could Kaito, because we don't want Rafine hanging around any longer than he has to be. So I don't manage to top deck a land. At this point I was wondering, is this a Wandering Emperor? Because the the opponent's held open 4 mana with 2 white, so I don't really want to just get my Heartstabber XR for no reason. But then I figure in the Esper deck, if it is a Wandering Emperor, it won't be the worst thing for it to go to 1 loyalty for a Heartstabber, and it's got just as good a chance of being this Obscura Interceptor, which is the other Flash 4 card in Esper. So you often find these about 50-50 split with Emperors. So luckily that call worked out. Unfortunately, obviously the opponent's got 4 life back, which is not great, and I've failed to hit my land draw again. So I've got 2 options, Kaito or Heartstabber. I think at this point I've decided that it's better to block with the Heartstabber and get another 2/2 blocker to try and stem this life gain from the opponent. However, they then had another Interceptor. I managed to push the Fable back to my hand, so it's looking like the opponent's going to gain 8, and I'm going to have to take 4 and chump. Obviously I want to chump because I want my Heartstabber dead, but still pretty vicious that the opponent goes up to 30 and we're down to 12. And still no land. Still no land. At this point I'm starting to get a bit salty. Managed to go through, I think it's 15 cards, and only 3 of them have resulted in land on the battlefield for me. So I put Kaito in and plus him in an attempt to get land, and don't find it again, so I have to concede. I mean, seen 16 cards, 4 of which were lands, and only 3 ever went to my hand, so that was basically impossible to win, I would say. I think I stick with the same deck because I didn't see any more evidence from the opponent that they were going to play any more spells or anything. And this could be the long sideboard wait from the opponent. No, it's a different opponent I'm thinking of. So, game 3. Obviously, just hoping for land, really. It's not the best hand in the world, but I have 2 land, and I've got an even Heartstabber, so I'm hoping that I can find enough land to get to big score, either by my Heartstabber dying or otherwise. Then this is looking like a nice hand. Because what big score basically does is ramp you into a 7-drop, providing you keep hitting lands. And we've got 2 7-drops to play. So I have managed to draw 2 lands, which is great. So I've already got all the land I need by this point. The opponent has a Hive of the Eye Tyrant, which I never like to see, because that's a way of removing stuff from the graveyard, but obviously it's a little while before they can power it up, so got a bit of leeway. I was expecting to see a Rafine, but luckily I saw a Wedding Announcement. Wedding Announcement's a lot less worrying. You know, 1/1s over time isn't too much of an issue. For this deck anyway, particularly when you've got a Toxtrel in hand, which you're eyeing up playing next turn. Big score, and then that get 2 treasure and then play Toxtrel. It's looking quite nice. The opponent doesn't attack, so I just big score at the end of their turn. And for some reason I've discarded the Toxtrel. I think the reason was that because they have left all their mana open, I was worried about holding it in hand and trying to play it out. I thought I'd rather put it in the graveyard and resurrect it. Not sure about that choice. As it happens, I drew one anyway. So I've got both the choice of both Xander and Toxtrel. At this point, obviously they have 4 mana open again, and last game they've proved that they're using the Obscura Interceptor, so I'm worried that it could be the Interceptor or Wandering Emperor. So I opt to try and play Xander. The reason being, as the opponent has 6 cards in hand, if this does resolve, they'll have to discard 3 of them, less anything they manage to play. So it's going to be a minimum of 2 cards they have to discard, really, which is a pretty nice hit off of Xander. So unlike last game, this game they had the Wandering Emperor. As I said, it's normally about 50-50 in these decks. So the opponent does have to discard 2 of their 5, which is obviously fairly back-breaking. Would be much worse if it was 3. But the fact that it manages to resolve means I can be pretty confident that they don't have any creature counters as well. Not that we think their deck's playing them, but you just never know really, so... Kind of a big risk move to try playing that, but it has paid off. I was thinking about attacking, and then I realised they haven't actually used the loyalty on Wandering Emperor, and obviously opt against that. When I look at their graveyard, they've ditched a Portable Hole and a Negate. Portable Hole's an interesting inclusion against me, because the only thing we really have as a target for that is the Heart Stabber, or the tokens off of Fable. But Negate is a nice thing for them to have to ditch. That shows that they're really holding on to something strong though, because they don't want to ditch our reanimation, a counter to our reanimation spells lightly. So opponents managed to have a pretty strong turn here, because they've put a 2-2 in with Wandering Emperor last turn and then have Ledger Shredder and Raffine in play. Obviously their problem here is that they've only got ground creatures to attack with, and I've got a 6-6 on the ground. So I think I'm questioning, like, will they attack basically for those connive triggers? Because they've only got 1 card in hand, so they can't guarantee hitting non-lands, and they definitely probably won't be discarding them and keeping a land. And so they opt not to attack, which I don't think I would have either. Their wedding announcement flips and all their creatures get bigger. Since I don't care about the state of Xander, I attack with him to mill half their library, but also, if they do kill it, they have to sack half their permanents, and they've got a lot of permanents at the moment, so my brain, I don't mind. I leave it killing the 2 samurai, because that leaves them with the highest number of permanents. They'll have to sack more things. So that leaves them with, I believe, 7 permanents. They've got to sack 3 of them, so I get to kill the other 3 tokens, basically. At this point, obviously, I've only got 5 mana, so I have a choice between Rohit and Kaito, and I think I have that choice, and then I realise I've only got 1 blue mana. So actually, my only real choice is to play the big score. I could play it in my turn and use the tokens to cast the treasures to cast something else, but I think what I really want to do with it is be playing Toxrill, so I decide to hold on to it. It could have been a bit dangerous in the sense that the opponent could have, that we know they're playing negates now, so I could have let them draw into a negate, but it's kind of the risk you take. So I've got 2 good targets in my graveyard, but I don't have any reanimation spell at the moment. So they put a first strike and 1/1 on the Ledger Shredder. At this point I worry, and then I realise that their hive is tapped because they've powered up the hive and the only black mana they have is the hive, so that's actually quite a big mistake by the opponent, because they've managed to use 4 of their mana to do nothing. Obviously they're just overly keen to try and exile some of the big creatures in my graveyard, but nice to see that mistake kind of help me out of it in this game. Since I only have 2 different converted mana costs in the graveyard, I think holding on to the Heart Stabber is probably not worthwhile. I'll probably do chump with it, but I can't remember. So I'm ditching the Everling because I'm aware that I can hard cast the Toxrill, and then chump with the Heart Stabber here. Because I want the Heart Stabber dead anyway, so fills up my graveyard, it puts another Xander in there, and then draws me a land, so sweet really. And now I'm awash with land. So I've got the choice of either playing out Toxrill or a combination of my other cards. I think I go with Toxrill because they have two decent sized creatures that I'm going to start taking some damage from. And then I change my mind. I think the reason is I just never really like jamming Toxrill without a good reason. And I'm aware that at this point the Heartstabber can get Death Touch, and they've got 2 flyers. So by playing a Heartstabber out, what I'm doing is effectively meaning one of those can't attack, which means one less connive for the opponent, because they can only really attack with whatever they give first strike from the Wandering Emperor. If they attack with both, then I kill one of them. So I'm restricting their card draw, which playing Toxrill would not do. They'd just be able to grow the creatures back with connive. So instead, I'm developing my own board a bit by playing the Heartstabber and Kaito. I don't mind drawing to discard, that's fine. So the opponent does have a second black land now, so they are able to exile something, but by now I've got plenty of stuff in there, so even if they get rid of one, I've got other targets for a Reanimate, so I think they know that and probably opt not to bother based on that. So I don't blame the opponent for taking some time to think here, because they've got quite a difficult choice. They've got 2 creatures flying, they can give 1 first strike, because they want to attack with at least 1 to grow the creature with connive, but there's a flying Death Toucher in the way, so the ability of the Heartstabber really coming in helpful there. So they put a 1/1 on Rafine. At this point I'm assuming they're just going to attack with Rafine to give it a 1/1 counter and connive 1 and keep the 5/7 as a blocker, but they actually had decided to attack with both, which I think is a bit of a misplay, because that 5/7 is very difficult to kill for my deck. So giving it away essentially for free, just, well, for connive 1 on the Rafine, or 1 extra, it doesn't feel worth it to me. So I'm more than happy with this trade. Obviously the Heartstabber gives me a benefit when it dies, so that's all good. And then there's just 1 creature to worry about. So I managed to draw Cardio's Vicious Return, so I've actually got something that can bring creatures back. So I play out a land, and I think at this point I'm thinking if I create a 1/1 with Kaito, I can then sacrifice that to the Vicious Return and kill off the Wandering Emperor, because the Wandering Emperor's got 3 life and it's got a bit of a wall in front of it otherwise. So that's my goal, I think, this turn. As I can't kill Rafine with it. I could kill the Aspirant, but I can kill the Aspirant with the 2 meat hooks in hand and Toxrill combined anyway. At this point I'm wondering if it's getting countered or maybe intercepted back into my hand, because they do have the 4 mana open. But they opt to just kill my token, which is a good play, because it means I can't sack a creature and I can't kill their Wandering Emperor. So instead I just pay 2 for meat hook, kill the Aspirant before it grows, or it grows Rafine, and take away 1 attacker, and then obviously pass the turn back. So pretty good back and forth game so far. I can never really deploy enough to keep the opponent down, although I feel like I'm constantly in control. Just never quite in control. Not whilst the opponent has the Wandering Emperor there. So opponent sort of blitzing their underdog, which is the right play. I think at this point they're trying to work out which to kill Kaito with. I think they were right first time. They want to attack Kaito with the underdog and then blitz the Rafine, but it doesn't matter because they're both going to end up as 4/4s probably. But then they end up discarding 2 lands, so I'm like, okay, they've just top decked land, I've thrown it away, so Rafine hasn't grown, that's good. Obviously I gain 1 life back from the blitzed underdog. Each player discards, well I've got a land to ditch, and that gets rid of 1 of their 2 cards, which again is a land. So at this point I've got a couple of options. but I think it's time for Toxrill. They've only got 1 card and 2 mana, so Toxrill goes in, puts a -1 counter on both creatures. I'm just looking what reanimation targets I've got, and the answer's still loads. So opponents obviously got thinking to do again, because they can power up their hive and get around Toxrill. But they opt to just attack with Rafine, so connive 1. And then they discard another underdog, so putting a 1/1 more on Rafine, so keeping its toughness a bit high. I'm very keen to see what they've got with their 2 other cards. So one is a Kaito, so obviously gives them the option to draw, which I'm surprised that they don't take, and they opt to put in a ninja. And they then opt to create another samurai. So the opponent's trying to go wide, but against the Toxrill, that feels like a weird decision to me. And then with the Vicious Return, I can bring back Xander. Obviously there's nothing for them to discard, but it does get haste off the back of Vicious Return, so I'm able to attack with it as well. What I realised is that I have a Ray of Enfeeblement now, so I can do -4 to Rafine, but it has 5 toughness currently. So if I attack with both, I mill just 6 cards from the opponent's library, because that's all they've got, 12. They make 2 blocks very sensibly, because those creatures are dead anyway. And then in the opponent's turn, I can kill Rafine because it will have -1 more from Toxrill. And my Ray of Enfeeblement is obviously an instant. So I play the Fable. And what I should have done here is put a stop at the start of my opponent's turn, but I forget and I let them draw, which, you know, could have been bad. They could have drawn something to either buff the Rafine or counter my Ray. So I let them try and put the 1/1 on it and then target it. And that's the end of the game. So it was a very, very close backwards and forwards game. About 27 minutes nearly in total. But yeah, GG to the opponent. It was a fun one. Okay, just very quickly going to wrap up now. So here is the deck on untapped.gg. I had 7 games with it in total with a 57% win rate. I think it is slowly getting better. The last version I've only played 2 and it has 100%. The one before that I had 50%, but I had a really bad sideboard at that point. I'm not really brilliant at sideboarding, so it took me a while to sort of learn what kind of things I needed to put in there. I think it's pretty good now, but it can definitely be improved. And also I'm not very good at playing this type of deck, you know, I'm more of a play all your creatures on curve kind of guy, so having to sort of mess about with reanimation and sort of knowing at what point in the game to try and pull off your big move and what points to just be suppressing the opponent, I think is a bit of a fine art, one that I'm still practicing, to be honest. But it's not a bad win rate. I feel like it could be a little bit higher. I think the deck is actually not bad, particularly if we was to like lower this down to 1 or 2 of these and have some Toxrills and Jinga Taxis in there instead. Obviously that would remove Olivia because it's only really good because this is a vampire, and that would then remove Evelyn. So, you know, there would be some tweaks as a result of removing 4 of those, but I think it's got a pretty good shell, and I'm probably keen to give it a little bit more of a go. Yeah, thank you for watching. If you do have any suggestions on how I can improve the deck, please do let me know. If you've got any other rares you want me to try out urgently, then please do leave a comment below. Otherwise, thank you for putting up with my face for this long. Please subscribe if you want more of it, and I will see you next time.